All right, welcome in. I'm the Kodiak, and today I'm here to talk about some Broncos trade targets and whether or not we should pursue some of them at the NFL trade deadline. But before we get into it, leave a like if you enjoy, subscribe if you're not already. You can also leave a comment. I am a relatively new Broncos channel, so that would help me get going. I would love you if you did leave a comment. But before we get into it, I just want to say leave a like if you enjoy, subscribe if you're not already as well. Let's dive right into it. So, are the Broncos in a position to make a move? I would say so. I would say that, you have a young quarterback, and if this is any time that you need proven talent to surround him, then yeah, why not make a move for him to help him and help your overall team? Because we are sitting at 4-3 with a winning record, and what I will say is that this team is kind of in a weird spot, but the games against Carolina and Baltimore will be very telling. Obviously, you handled business against a broken team last week in the New Orleans Saints, and you have the opportunity to do that again against Carolina. And for young quarterbacks and for teams that really haven't had a lot of time to play together, haven't had, their core pieces around with each other for a very long time, obviously, taking care of business is something that can kind of, be, I don't know, put on the back burner in the back of your head. Like, obviously, we should beat Carolina. There is nothing that in this game that suggests that we, A, should lose to Carolina, B, can't beat Carolina. But when you have a young team, when you have a lot of guys that haven't really been in place before with one another, you don't really know how a team will respond to stuff like that. And you won 2 games this year where nobody expected you to. Nobody expected you to beat Tampa Bay, and nobody expected you to beat the Jets. And you did that in the middle of the year, but now it's time to really ramp it up and make a push for the playoffs. And we're still ultimately in our retooling, rebuilding phase. So defensively, nothing needs to change. You could argue they do need to, stiffen some things up with the run game because obviously you're going to be playing against Baltimore and you're going to be playing against KC. So your run defense does need to get going. Your run defense does need to play better because it's been inconsistent this year. It's played very, very well at certain points, but first half against the Raiders, pretty much the whole game against the Chargers. I'm not really thrilled with those performances. So if they can just tune it up a little bit and play more consistent and show out in those games, that'd be fantastic. But offensively, we need to add skill position guys to make a run because what we have right now at, in particular, receiver and tight end, I'm not really thrilled with. If we really were to make a shot at, trying to go far in this year's playoffs, even despite the fact that we have, $60 million in dead cap. I believe the number's actually closer to $70 million because of Gregory, too, and Russell Wilson. Yeah, we need to add some skill position dudes to make a run. So I'm going to talk about some skill position guys who I think could help the Denver Broncos and whether or not we should trade for them. So why is Travis Etienne potentially available for the Jacksonville Jaguars? Well, he's kind of been a walking injury his whole career. Obviously, his rookie year, he had that Achilles or Liz Frank. I can't remember exactly what it was, but he had a really bad injury. Didn't really get going until his second year. Second and third years, that's when he kind of really started to get going throughout his NFL careers. But now he's in his 4th year, and he's being outplayed by Tank Bigsby. And he was good last year, but he has lost a step this year. Like, it has not even been a question as to who has been the better running backs of the two, between Etienne, between Bigsby. And, ultimately, he is an affordable trade candidate. His cap hit would only be $6.1 million. I don't know if the Jaguars would have to eat some dead cap for trading or cutting him because he ultimately was a first-round pick, and dead cap numbers are higher for those guys. But what does he do? So he's kind of like, I don't know how to describe this. I don't really see him being anything other than a plus version of what we had last year with Samaje Perine. I don't really know. I don't really have anything to back this up, but I don't think Etienne would be as good in pass protection as Perine was last year. But Perine last year was our 2-minute drill specialist. Perine last year was, kind of the guy that would really get those drives going and keep them alive for the Denver Broncos when Russell Wilson would, check it down. And Perine always made a play. But the efficiency just is not there anymore for Travis Etienne. Our run game's been inconsistent, but Javonte Williams is showing flashes of being able to be a good starting running back again, even after it looked like he was a bad one through his first 3 games this year. But I think the projected asking price for a guy like Travis Etienne would be a 5th through 7th, just because Jacksonville, they know they have no leverage. They've only won 2 games this year, and they're probably not going to make the playoffs. They just paid Trevor Lawrence a massive contract. And I think Etienne does cost a lot of money if they were to keep him on the team throughout the offseason as well. So, yeah. So, Etienne, he provides something we don't have. Ultimately, the ball security would be nice. We don't really have that in estimate. Jaleel McLaughlin, he's good, but in negative game scripts, we kind of tend to get away from him. And he's not really that great of a receiving back. And then obviously we have Javonte Williams, who is kind of like our fall forward back and, keep the chains moving guy. And he is our RB1. But Etienne, ultimately, he just doesn't fit the direction of this team. We need guys that are ready to play. We need guys that are going to be able to contribute to us. While theoretically we have a round 1 QB whose window and our window should be open 2 to 3 years, assuming Knicks does continue to improve. But yeah, so one of the bombshells that just dropped over the past few days was that Cooper Kupp was potentially on the outs in LA. And why is he potentially available? Well, the Rams, their window is probably closed. And they have a very tough division. The 49ers, they're littered with injuries. The Cardinals have kind of stepped it up this year. Cardinals probably aren't a serious threat, but yeah. And then who's the other team in the division? Yeah, Seattle. They've kind of been hit or miss this year. Once they got all their guys back on the defensive line, they started to play better. But the Puka Nacua breakout, that's what kind of makes the team, I think, okay with leaving Cooper Kupp behind, because honestly, Sean McVay, he doesn't need a whole lot to make his offense go, especially if Matthew Stafford is still the quarterback. Stafford does not look as effective as he did last year, and I think his career is I think we've kind of seen the last of him. But with Cooper Kupp, he could still ball. Like in week 1, without Puka Nacua, he still caught like 15 or 16 passes or whatever ridiculous number it was. He's had a lot of injuries over the past 2 years. This year, in week 2, he got hurt with that ankle injury. Last year, he had problems with the hamstring at the start of the season. So, yeah. And one of the cap implications with Cooper Kupp is he has a very expensive contract, even if the Rams eat some. So there are very, very few teams that are actually in a position to make a move for Cooper Kupp. And even if the Rams eat some of it, his base cap hit, I believe, is still only $14 million. I don't really know what the cap hit for him would be if you trade for him, because his total contract this year is like $29 million or something like that. But oh well. And then the cap implications for him, I just don't really know where that fits into our direction in general. But what I will say is that he would give Bo Nix a nice power slot security blanket. Obviously, if you got if the Rams for some reason ended up just outright cutting him, which would never happen, obviously a free Cooper Kupp, that'd be a huge boost to this offense. But the Rams reportedly want a 2025 second round pick. And I don't know, that's just one of those things I go back to. We are not a legit Super Bowl contender yet. Now, if we were in a position to where we could use our second round picks on a guy like Cooper Kupp, I'd be all for it. And I would just be like, okay, let's see, what this guy can do for our offense, because I do believe that Cooper Kupp could be a huge chain mover and huge short accuracy, mid-game, intermediate game boost to this offense. But ultimately, we don't need like a high-risk, high-reward trade for an older guy, at least. For a younger guy, maybe. But for an older wide receiver, I'm not entirely sure. Now, Deontay Johnson, this one would be a better move for Cooper Kupp, in my opinion, but he's kind of the same. Obviously, I think Kupp is still a better player at this point in his career, but Deontay Johnson has kind of been an injury machine over the past few years, and he is a good separator, earning targets, separating. That's a skill in itself for wide receivers, but he also has a semi-manageable cap hit at $10 million, but overall, we probably just need better wide receiver play, and Deontay Johnson, he would actually fit into this team decently well, in my opinion. I don't think Carolina's going to really be asking for too much just to move off him, because, that franchise is just an absolute wreck right now. And it seems like Dan Morgan is just kind of, going with the flow. And they have Xavier Legette, who has kind of emerged and taken the reins and shown that he can at least be a starting wide receiver in the NFL over these past few weeks. Even if he hasn't shown it consistently yet, I think Carolina would want to bank on the potential there. And ultimately, this would be a better move than Cooper Kupp. And we could make it happen. I think the semi-manageable cap hit, that's where I get things. That's why I put it there, because you could make it happen. You could restructure DJ Jones. You could restructure Ben Powers. you could restructure a handful of guys that would make this a viable move. But once again, I just don't really think that we'd be a good fit. I think Deontay would be a good fit for us. I don't think we'd be a good fit for Deontay, especially because he's been riding out bumps in the passing game throughout his whole career. Like, even when he was good in Pittsburgh, Ben Roethlisberger's arm was absolutely shot. And obviously, he goes to Carolina. So, yeah. Do I hate this move? Not really, but it would be a better move than Cooper Kupp. And, yeah. So, Kyle Pitts, why is he potentially available? Well, people throw his name out every offseason, even at the trade deadline last year when they had Arthur Smith. His career really hasn't going in Atlanta at all, but he is a reliable tight end body. He caught a bunch of passes this past week, and he has actually started to really ramp up after he had that game where he had no catches and no involvement this year, and he had literally everybody in the NFL world freak out because Kyle Pitts has had a very, very volatile career so far in Atlanta. He puts up almost 1,000 yards in his rookie year with Matt Ryan, and then afterwards, he just has not gotten going at all. But one thing that really does matter to NFL teams, one thing that really does matter to NFL front offices, and George Paton said this a while ago, that you want to scout every player. Even though they knew that they probably weren't going to be seeing Kyle Pitts at 9th overall in 2021, no problem with that. You ended up with Patrick Surtain again. You still want to get grades on every player because ultimately you never know who's going to be available. And I will say, Kyle Pitts, for better or for worse, he just hasn't lived up to what he's supposed to be. You could make the argument that he is being wasted in Atlanta, and I am not going to disagree with you at all. But he just doesn't play. He just doesn't use his athleticism the way that I think a lot of people were hoping when he was coming out of Florida. And I think he'd be a very, very expensive. I think he'd be a very expensive trade target as well, especially because he was the first pick of Terry Fontenot's draft tenure in Atlanta. And if they, Atlanta doesn't get better by trading Kyle Pitts this year. And I think that Atlanta stays put ultimately since their offense has ramped up, since Kirk Cousins and Drake London and Bijan Robinson, they're all kind of starting to find their groove. So he'd be a very expensive option. I don't really know how I'd feel if we traded for him because I've been a Kyle Pitts truther for this long. But with better coaching, he could be baby goat status. But I'm just not entirely sure that we have the offensive development, and we've had the offensive development over the past few years to make this happen. So the one thing I will say is that I've seen this all over Broncos Twitter lately. David Njoku. And the Browns are potentially going through a fire sale after Deshaun Watson has not worked out. And he's a streaky tight end, but last year when he had Joe Flacco as quarterback, he was a difference maker. This year with Jameis Winston, he caught 10 passes for 76 yards this past week. So he has a $9.6 million cap hit this year. We could make that. We absolutely could make that happen. Same with, I talked about that when I brought up Deontay Johnson, and Kyle Pitts has around the similar cap hit as well this year, and he is a complete tight end. He's a good blocker, not a great one, not like having an extra O lineman out there, but he is a plus blocker at the NFL level, which is great because obviously you want a guy to be well versed in both. That way you don't have a tell on the defensive side of the ball when a guy's out there and when he's not, and he's a good receiving threat as well. And I think that they would need a 2025 second just to even think about moving off of David Njoku, because I think that this is a piece that could survive the Cleveland fire sale. And the fit is borderline perfect. The Broncos, they've gotten nothing from their tight ends all year. Dulcich has been an enormous bust, and it doesn't look like he's going to get going here at all. But can you make it work? Can you make the David Njoku experiment work if you are Denver and you do end up trading for him? And this is why there's so few trades throughout the NFL in season, because you don't really know how a guy's going to respond to being thrust into a new situation and having to learn a new offense and anything like that. But yeah, so that just basically does it for me. Leave a like if you enjoy, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.